Hi, I recently read 2 books about wisdom. After reading the first one, I really wanted to make a review of it. But when starting to reading the other, I decided that I had to do a review of both of them in the same video. They are about the same theme, it's wisdom, but the takes about it is so different and so complementary that it made sense to review them together. The first of the books is Practical Wisdom, The Right Way to Do the Right Thing, by Schwartz and Kenneth Sharpe. This is all about one philosopher's take on wisdom, namely Aristotle. He called it what the authors says, or best translated, practical wisdom. I really loved the first chapter that discussed Aristotle and his views, and the connection and disconnection between rules and wisdom. The other book, it's called Wisdom from Philosophy to Neuroscience by Stephen S. Hall. This book, on the other hand, seemed to mention everyone else except Aristotle. And that seems a bit strange for me. He do make a lot more in-depth discussion about the term wisdom by mentioning a much bigger variety of philosophers and wise persons in history. He discusses much more of Socrates, Plato, Jewish wisdom, Confucius, Buddha, but as I mentioned, it barely mentions Aristotle. There are only a few side note occasions where Aristotle is mentioned, and even in the end notes he thanks a person for giving his Aristotelian nudges, but there are really very few ones of those. Hall's discussion of the term and the content of wisdom is very interesting nonetheless. And he uses a lot of more space in the book than Schwartz and Sharpe does in their book. What I also like a lot is this historical inquiry of the term, how it has evolved and how different persons uses it and how they are very similar in a sense. And this by itself seems more fulfilling than only focusing on Aristotle. Schwartz and Sharpe, however, they have a much simpler task in finding wisdom and using Aristotle as their only or almost only source. And that also might be a very good thing, because Aristotle had a lot of essential things to say about this. You could also say that because of this, the book focuses a lot more on this one side of wisdom, and that is the practical side of it. This book gives some practical examples, and then uses those examples throughout the book, giving this book a red thread through the whole book. Here Hall is much all over the place. He divides wisdom into 8 different characteristics, and instead of limiting his examples, he uses a multitude of studies to defend his points. He has points made both by ancient philosophers, but also in the context of history, and then the modern view and study of wisdom. That is really interesting to read about. He focuses of course extra on the neuroscience part of it, and on different studies in how the brain works compared to wisdom and choices made wisely. There is therefore a lot of this side of the brain turned on, lights up when we did this, and then this other side lighted up when we did this compared to this study and stuff like that. And that is a bit confusing. It is great insight, but it is also a lot of theory, and maybe a little bit too much of complicated theory as well. So this is another place where Schwartz and Sharpe differs from Hall, once again. They use most examples from real life, the actual practice of wisdom. And they only overlap a few times in referencing the same studies. Of real life examples, they use the school system, hospitals and doctors, lawyers, banking, and even firefighters. They do all this trying to be as apolitical as possible, but it is easy to see what they think seems to be the wisest thing to do. But less control breeds more wisdom. Hill, on the other hand, seems a bit on the other side of this. He is apolitical as well, but I think his inspirations is from a different branch. Also, he deals a little bit more with science, so it's more dry and more objective maybe. I found the weakest chapter to be the chapter on altruism. where he makes some strange conclusions that also hints his political views. I also suspect that this is why he omitted Aristotle as a focus. Other than this, and the part that in the end he didn't have much more interesting to add, on a positive note, it was a really good book on wisdom. I really like that he included modern science together with ancient philosophy in the discussion of wisdom. He got this way a great discussion and gave the discussion a lot of perspective. Schwartz and Sharpe had another big problem. Because they used so much time in real life examples and the non-essential of those examples, much of this book became a bore. Of course, some of the discussions are really interesting. I'm still thinking in a lot of the discussions they brought up, so it's not a waste of time at all. I also see this book as a really good book on wisdom if you want to read one. I really loved the discussion about wisdom in the school system and how the state's regulations hinder a lot of that. But often the conclusions they make are really common sense, and the beginning chapter really gives the answer to most of the conclusions beforehand. But I do like and I do agree with most of their conclusions, and I try to build a case for it. In the end, they make an appeal to hope, that there is still hope for wisdom, but it does not manage to give the book the good send-off that I hoped. So both of these books are really good, but they have some strengths and weaknesses, both of them. I did like Hall's book a little bit better because of the style and the broader discussion. I love Practical Wisdom because of its focus on Aristotle, and that it's a little bit more agreeable book. But this book disappointed me a little bit more. So, which one of these would you like to read?